Hi everybody, welcome back. Let's take another look at Bulvar before the Hales expansion drops. Even if the color scheme of this campaign is quite dark, the nation that we're looking at now fits more in the light theme in a very interesting way. I'm talking about Karashar, a unique, almost secret black orc formable nation. Our story starts in the western end of the Serpent's Reach with a masked butcher orc clan. It is a typical orcish war band that followed the old Dukan ways of pillaging the carcasses of ruined dwarven kingdoms. Warlord Vririg Beard Butcher pushed his clan to the gates of Arg Urdstun, the regional dwarven remnant. The elan of his orcish Dwarvar reclaimers was unstoppable, and the dwarves were quickly besieged and butchered, with the few remaining ones subjugated. After capturing the Arg Urdstun trophies and the feudalism institution, Vririg continued to explore the tunnels to the west in search for more trophies. From the walls of Orlghelovar, the orcs could scout the old human lands of Ordia, now overrun by the exile goblins of Oblig Shield. The clean air of the Ordian hills gave Vririg a strange feeling, and so he convoked his clan council to discuss the option of leaving the cramped tunnels and ruined dwarven halls behind to see what this open world had to offer. The crumbling tower of Bal Ourd was visible in the distance. If the dwarven holds are so rich in trophies, they wondered what kind of plunder these lands would promise. The decision was made to abandon the ambitions of reclaiming the Dwarvar, and thus the clan attacked the goblins and subjugated them as well. The tower proved to be a disappointment, an empty ruin where destitute humans and filthy goblins squat. A great blue sea was to be seen from up high. "What is this?" a scout asked. "The sea," a goblin guide answered. "Does it have any loot?" Not really. Not many boats float around here." Useless. The orcs rounded up humans and goblin prisoners for interrogation. "Where's the loot?" they would ask again and again in different towns and settlements. The Ordi humans were talkative at least and had some stories to tell. The beard butchers were interested to hear as many as these cowardly people were willing to share to figure out where all the riches were hidden. There has to be something good to plunder in these lands. Their stories of the surrounding areas were quite bleak though. They would recount their frightening stories of mischievous fae and invisible wood elves to the northeast. Not unusual, orcs would use the same tactics within the tunnels, blending with the darkness and ambushing dwarven caravans, not as stealth archers, but as stealth butchers. The humans would also tremble in fear while describing the demon gnolls of the northwestern swamps. Funny, stupid gnolls would sacrifice anyone to their gods. The orcs would sacrifice only the finest warriors. Dukan would be insulted to receive such sacrifices as these wretches. Southern scouts returned with tales of goblins that were creating chaos in the mountains of a land called Bahar. More disappointment. The masked butcher clan was getting more restless every week. The decision to abandon the mountains did not seem like a wise one, and the warriors were demanding payment and loot. There was nothing here but desolation, poverty, and useless stories. Who cares about the Milkorio Urdi Bahari, the Phoenix Empire, or however many fallen empires were here if there were no worthy trophies to be found? The lands of the Phoenix Empire to the east, my lord. They are sure to be rich in plunder. Even the weapons of the successor kingdoms are rumored to be made of gold. Go east, my lord. Truth or lies? No matter. Vririg gathered the clan and headed back into the mountain, leaving the goblins to take care of whatever was left of Ordia in their name. The orcs deftly navigated the caves and emerged at Shaztumdir, the southern hold and the gate to Bulvar. Trying to evade having to deal with goblins anymore, they ended up running into even more goblins. They spilled like rats out of the mountain, while Dukan's warriors laid waste to the dwarven kingdoms, and they were now everywhere. The butchers invaded the Marbleheads and advanced to the great city of Akatbar. Now this was a prize. The earth was shaken and the walls of the city fell, opening the way for the looters. This was no ruin. This was a thriving city. Plunder was magnificent and the mayhem lasted for weeks. Scouts did indeed confirm that the successor empires to the south, though locked in the cold conflict, were even richer and their armies will make good sacrifices for Dukan. The kingdom of Birsartanshes was invaded next. The human armies were herded by capable elven officers, but were completely unprepared to face the savage orcs in battle. Contrary to the stories and legends, their weapons and armor were made of iron and not gold, which was disappointing, but the forests were rich in game and the food was plentiful. The Black Tide in Bulvar was only beginning. It would end up lasting for about a decade. This was the legacy of Ririg, the first beard butcher, who would eventually die in 1466. As it was typical in Orcish customs, succession was decided by prowess in battle and legitimized by blood. Warlord Fubar, the first beard butcher, would conquer his title and continue the work of his predecessor. The Harpies in the east, after they sent an insulting envoy who dared to steal from Orcish lands, were invaded and brought down to earth with the help of goblin ballistae. Azka Evran was invaded, and the humans were set up to exploit the local gold mine to fund the Orcish horde. A modest fleet was established. The Duchy of Paharkand was subjugated, and the mountain herders of Gelkar were taken over from Birsartanshes. The island nation of Ebortil decided to take advantage of the chaos in Bahar to attack from the sea. Their fleet unbreakable, but their armies weak, being cleaved mercilessly until they ultimately gave up and sailed back to their island fortress. The wars in northern Bulvar were in many ways seen by chroniclers at the time in the same light as the Green Tide in Escan or the Grey Tide in the Reach, more Orcish barbarity. This would all be true, of course, until the year 1474, when an unlikely turn of events ended up having seismic consequences for the Masked Butcher clan. It was more of a process than a single event. The Orcs spent most of their short, savage history in caves and darkness. The lands of Bulvar were a stark contrast to everything they ever knew. They were bright, open, and bathed in the inexorable light of the sun. The sun was a force like nothing else they encountered before. Brutal in its shining, it was present in all things. It could be seen on the shields and tapestries of these people. It could be seen in their eyes. It was in their poetry, in their battle cries, in their temples, and in the arid land itself. Some people would refer to it as Surakel, and it was in many ways like Tukan, but so much more powerful and so much more present. One could have gazed upon Dukan if they would have been in his presence, but none could look at Surakel directly. Yet he was there, flying over the sky each day. The Orcs could feel it in all its monstrous glory on their skin in the dawn after every battle. The Bulvari slaves called it Surakel. The human herd captured from the Harpies had the biggest impact over the Black Orcs and their culture. They used to follow a great warrior called Dartax, who fell in battle not many years ago. They fought the elves, they fought the goblins and the Harpies. So did the Orcs. They did it with great fierceness. They did it to break their chains. So did the Orcs. The parallels were uncanny. Dukan was brutal and merciless in the past, and his spirit lives on through his people. Yet Warchief Fubar I would come out of his great tent in Akatbar and would witness the brutal mercilessness of Surakel every day. There had to be more in the stories of these humans, so he chose a handful of wise shamans and traveled to Garlaskel to try and speak with the Dartaxi slave warriors and learn more about their faith. The old Dukan ideas met the old Sun cult ideas, more in signs and grunts. These Bulvari were slaves, yet their fiery eyes betrayed a lust for freedom that was familiar to the Orcs. This was Surakel's freedom. The Orcs understood how the successors of Jahir corrupted this freedom and Surakel's truths. These elves called it the New Sun cult and used this corruption to subjugate the humans of this continent. At least the dwarves were honest in their bigotry, but this is much worse. After a few months, the war chief decided that any truth must be backed up by prowess in battle, so he let loose the slaves of Garlaskel to fight for their faith. The rebels of the Old Sun cult ravaged the lands and ultimately entered the ziggurat of Akatbar and proved their worth. The victory of these slaves pleased the war chief, and he was the first to paint the image of Surakel on his face, replacing the traditional mask of the butcher. His clan warriors chanted and roared and followed his example. But to his astonishment, when he watched over his chanting troops from atop the ziggurat steps, he could see orcs and humans together. They would praise him in one voice as one clan. Tradition would call for him to shout a war cry, but the chants were overwhelming. Instead, he raised his hands towards the sun and kneeled. In this divine ecstasy, the war chief could not even feel the stream of tears flowing from his eyes. Far away to the east, in 1479, an invitation arrived at the old ziggurat in Az-Kasur just as the sun was setting. Words were written in a shaky hand but with a clear message. A delegation of priests was requested by the orcs who have recently spilled into Bulvar. The purpose could not quite be made out, but the repeated promises of safety ameliorated the priesthood's worries. And so a handful of junior priests departed, riding some of the kingdom's least valuable horses. As the emissaries approached, at roughly noon, they saw a field of silver and black waiting outside Akatbar. Thousands upon thousands of black orcs, armor-clad, arrayed around a small hill. The priests looked askance at one another, but none wanted to be the first to suggest cowardice, and so they slowly nudged their steeds towards this convocation. The envoys neared, having to force their mounts along, especially when the orcs started to beat their weapons against one another and parted ranks to let them through. Swallowing their fear and their bewilderment, the delegation continued through the throng towards the figure at its center. That figure, a tall orc, skin black as night, a sharp contrast to the golden crown gleaming in his hands. He gestured the delegation to stop. Its leader dismounts. The orc briefly closes his eyes, nods. He steps forward, places the crown in the Dartaxi priest's hands, and kneels before him. The noise all around suddenly ceases. The land goes quiet, all Bulvar seemingly to hold its breath. That priest has been in his position only a few years, in the priesthood less than a decade. What could he say? What could he do aside from the obvious? And so, with trembling hands, he places the crown on the chieftain's head. A moment passes, two, and then the orc rises, the silence broken. Every orc chants a single word. Karakal, Karakal, Karakal. And so, the Karashari Empire was officially born. Storytime pause. Let's take a look at this crazy mess that was created. What is Karashar? It is the Black Sun, a formidable black orc empire in Bulvar. Their whole theme is repentance for being a cursed race and fighting for the humans of Bulvar against elven oppressors and other dangers, hoping that in the process they are forgiven by Surakel. Where liberation is normally a joke word for conquest of subjugation, the Karashari orcs truly wish to protect the humans of Bulvar and allow them to worship Surakel in peace, free from the elven oppression and shielded from gnolls and other monsters. Their ultimate aim is to return all Bulvari lands to the humans, removing any other non-human race, including their own, from each and every respective province. They are the only self-purging nation in this game at this point, and that's something else. The requirements to form it are being a black orc, following the old Sun cult religion, and having the capital in Bulvar. These are the main conditions, of course, as you also need at least 100 development, with at least 3 provinces in Bulvar, 2 stability and admin tech level 7, which is more of a formality. Any black orc may found Karashar, with the closest being the Masked Butcher clan, but Road Warrior is also a good contender if you carve through Harpilan lands from the northeast. Picking a capital is important. I chose Akatbar, but in retrospect moving into Ovdal Tungr instead and building the Black Orc tribe infrastructure in it before reforming into the Black Sun would have been a much more powerful play. Forming Karashar grants an ominous black color, but their lore is actually quite wonderful. They have a unique mission tree and level 1 government reform that heavily encourages controlling many vassals and protecting the Bulvari humans and their faith. The Karashari Empire reform installs a grand Akalet government, with Akalet interactions similar to EU4 vanilla Arabian tribes, that pacify subjects or siphon a great amount of income or manpower from them every 20 years. It also grants one extra diplomatic slot together with 50% more income from vassals. The big drawback is a 50% penalty to government capacity. That's okay. You will be doing a different kind of blobbing with Karashar. The mission tree does insist on you eventually controlling at least 5 subject nations with Bulvari human culture, so keep that in mind. This is quite funny because black orcs are monstrous and have orcish administration, obviously, both of which add a combined penalty of -2 diplomatic reputation. Changing the culture will remove the Karashar reform, which could be mechanically strong but also lame lore-wise and not wholesome at all. The monstrous nation debuff can be removed through the demonstrification mechanic, and it makes sense to do it in order to alleviate the large opinion malice with your human friends. The Karashari signature religion is the Old Sun cult. This one is quite rare, and to convert to it you will have to move fast. The only 2 nations that follow this cult at the start of the game are Maket, far away to the southeast, and Tartak Serdim in the northern Bulvar. These 2 nations are relatively weak, so you might want to swiftly press forward and save the Old Sun cult provinces from being converted by the successor states, the Harpies or the Gnolls. The Old Sun cultists pray to a single god, Surakel, as he is known in Bulvari language. While originally part of a larger pantheon, the rest of the gods were slain by something called the Malevolent Dark, and he was the only one that survived. Before the arrival of the elves, the Bulvari Sun cult believed that Surakel would one day be reborn and lead the Bulvari people to defeat the Malevolent Dark. After the elf Jaher arrived and saved Bulvar from the Gnolls in the Sunrise War, he was proclaimed as Surael reborn, and following his death, the new Sun cult passed on his role to his people, the Sun Elves. The Old Sun cultists reject Jaher and the elven rule while still waiting for the coming of Surakel. The religion itself is defensive in a sense. It has a baseline +2 tolerance of the true faith, 40% larger garrison size, and 10% local defensiveness, while being very hard to convert due to a -3% local missionary strength. Each Old Sun cult province is like a little religious center of its own. Additionally, it has the Coptic ancestor worship holy site mechanic. Their holy site bonuses are welcome for a defensive play, but are not very strong. Also, due to the lack of Old Sun cult nations, you will have to personally conquer all the holy sites, which is a neat little side quest. The 5% idea cost reduction is small but makes sense as a first bonus, alongside the 0.5 yearly army tradition. The national unrest bonus is also nice but not amazing. Yearly corruption reduction and attrition for enemies are there too. The one good thing is that these bonuses will apply to all your Old Sun cult vassals as well, so the attrition for enemies bonus will be felt by your foes in all your subjects' territories. Another thing of note is that the Old Sun cult may install holy orders. These can be applied to any fully controlled state, whether your own or your subjects. There are 3 holy orders to choose from. Selecting one will cost the respective type of monarch power and will raise the respective development type in each of the provinces in the state by 1 point. The administrative holy order reduces unrest and governing costs, the diplomatic one increases goods produced and makes construction cheaper, while the military one will increase unrest but grant more manpower and will alleviate devastation. We have a less than optimal race leading a vassal horde with a less than optimal religion that has some lackluster bonuses. What ideas does this underdog nation have then? The traditions give missionary strength against the new Sun cult and vassal liberty desire reduction, which makes perfect sense for once. 15% cheaper province wars core cost will be helpful in reclaiming the lands from the elven oppressors and helping them prosper under the light of Surakel. The small diplomatic reputation and later development cost reduction serve to counteract some relevant orcish natural malices. The half-orcs are a shame for the Karashari people, and they believe that humans are pure blood and must not be tainted with their own vile one, to the surprise and gratefulness of the Pulvari. The Sun Guardian 15% morale bonus is a very good military bonus, as it is up to the creatures of darkness who have seen the light to fight for Surakel's forgiveness. The Sacred Wife's 15% stability cost reduction is also helpful due to the troubled succession feuds. These wives are human noble women who marry into Karashari nobility and soothe the savage nature of the Orcs, not by sharing their beds, but by sharing cultural, intellectual and artistic activities to help pave the road to Surakel's forgiveness. Afterwards, the small tax bonus will help a bit with their income, while 15% advisor cost reduction is also pretty good, thanks to the many sages who volunteer to help the Orcs in running their empire. Wrapping things up is the +1 diplomatic relations ambition. Between all the diplomatic relation bonuses, not counting policies, Karashar can easily have a natural 11 diplomatic partners, whether allies or subjects, the many rays of the Black Sun. For idea sets, influence and diplomatic are no-brainers. Religious ideas are also very strong and synergize well with Karashari game style and theme, even if in general they are not a great idea set in Anbennar. Quality and offensive military ideas also make sense, as fielding a large army will lower your subjects' liberty desire. The mission tree is a simple and functional one. Surakel requires nothing more. The early part of the mission tree is mostly a chain of conquests designed to destroy the elven lies and restore the true sun faith across the subcontinent. It also involves itself a little bit into transforming the capital of Karashar into a religious center and the construction of a big black ziggurat unlike anything else seen before. The unenlightened goblins are removed, the insidious harpies are defeathered, the Salahad desert roads are made to flow with jewels, silks, and the knowledge of Surakel's truth. The demonic gnolls are purged. The more tragic side of the Karashari tale is the immovable hatred and lack of understanding that the dwarves harbor. Thus, Ovdal-Tungur and the Middle Dwarovar are destined to fall. The cursed Orcs must set siege once again to the majestic dwarven holds so that the chosen of the sun may prosper in peace. The holds of the Serpent's Reach, Arg Ordstun and Gorburad would be allowed to dig in peace and prosper for centuries after the Black Orc Enlightenment, to the joy of the Caracals. It is only natural that they do not understand. They toy with artificial rays of light in their mountain holes, but they are no substitute for the holy rays of Surakel that bathe the Suran plains so generously. Expansion into the successor lands is easier during the new Sun Cult masquerade crisis, when all nations begin distrusting each other. Their division can and should be exploited for maximum gains. A true golden age is declared in 1517, almost 40 years since the Orcs converted to the new faith. 15 years later, Karakal Fubar II starts the process of demonstration. But even in the civilized decades after 1556, the Orcish nature is not fully contained. The Black Sun armies stay true to their vision of protecting the chosen people, but internally their savage ways would often emerge, especially after old Caracals would die and new ones would climb to the throne. Successions are often contested with trials of battle, and thus the Beard Butchers are defeated by the Doomhammers in 1581. The Doomhammer Karakal Konak II, after leading an expedition into the sands to find the lost city of Ulmisbar, is assassinated by adventurers from a different realm and leaves the throne open for the Rockskull clan. Unique permanent modifiers are almost non-existent. Missions mostly give modest temporary boons, with a very notable 10% administrative efficiency bonus for 25 years after a successful invasion of the city of Bulvar proper and its surrounding farmlands. Once the banner of the Black Sun flies above every city in the subcontinent, the second leg of the journey to forgiveness begins. The main task now is to guard the chosen and feed them, develop their lands and allow them to prosper. This will take the Black Sun armies both further east and west into the deserts of Salahad and the floodplains of North Sarhal. In their pious quests, the Orcs return all the prosperity to the Bulvari by resettling them into the rich lands that the Black Sun guards, including in their own Orcish provinces. 3 centuries after the cursed and sinful Black Orcs have seen the light, prosperity truly returns to the children of Surakel. In 1761, Karakal Rockskull wonders if it is done. He took up his crown, knowing that he and his people were accursed, knowing that they have sinned before Surakel. but believing beyond doubt that they could one day cleanse themselves of their crimes and earn atonement in his eyes. Every citizen of Karashar has toiled for the same, from the sacred wives to the orcs that have lived and died for the cause. Perhaps they will not achieve total forgiveness until Surakel returns to rule over Bulvar and lead it to an age of light and glory. But everything else that they might do, everything else that they might forge in his name and his honor, it has been done. As a dwarf fan myself, the Nation of the Black Sun was a very pleasant surprise. They stand in stark contrast with all the evils, the monstrosities, the hatred and the politicking of this world. They are truly wholesome and honest in their naive ambition to help Surakel's faithful. They did not feel like a crusading army, but a truly benevolent army of liberators with some serious unsullied vibes for those of you who are familiar with Game of Thrones. They stayed true to their mission throughout their history, and I ended up playing and conquering more than I intended to in the beginning without even noticing. I had control over all Escan, the Serpent Spine, and half of the Empire of Anbennar before helping the Orcs achieve their earthly goals. The strong vassal play was also refreshing. It is a very strong type of play in Vanilla EU4, and I was reminded that the same applies in Anbennar too. With most other playthroughs, I don't really focus that much due to the nature of most mission trees, but with the simplicity of the Karashari missions and their specific bonuses, it came natural. All I can say in the end is that I hope that you will eventually find forgiveness, little orcs. I would like to thank my Patreons very much for their faith and contribution. In alphabetical order, thank you Baconomics, thank you Casimir Overell, thank you Dan Lambert, and thank you Michael VR. May Surakel's light bless you all. All the best to everyone.